The modern day HR director, first and foremost, has to be about the business. The Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police is very clear that my responsibilities are to represent my function, but first and foremost I'm a director of the Metropolitan Police, and he wants my contribution to be about what the Met is about, not just what HR is about. And the modern day HR director, I feel, has to be so commercially wise and astute, so business driven, that it simply is not good enough to be a good HR specialist. Actually, you've got to be empathetic at the very least with the business that you're in. Understand it, understand what makes it tick, be driven by it, be keen on its success, be contributing to its success, and then making sure that your own part of that is in shape and in good order. I grew up as a general manager. I fell into HR purely by accident. I got spotted early in my life when I got involved in the resolution of a national dispute, and I got involved in the negotiations, and then out of that somebody spotted something and invited me to run HR in an organisation, and from there on it's history in terms of this is now my fourth HR directorship in a major organisation. So I fell into it by accident, really, which is why I've never been a HR personnel specialist. Some people may say that's a drawback. I can only give the example of my daughter, who works for a recruitment advertising company, has expressed lots of interest in having a HR career, and my advice to her has been go and do something in manufacturing, go and do something in sales, go and do something in running the business, which is why she's working in very much a sales and an account management role for a recruitment advertising company at the moment. Because actually that's the best experience, about getting some street wisdom, about getting some knowledge about what makes businesses run, what makes them fall over, and then using that in order to develop the people function in the organisation. So my view is that actually the best HR people are those who have got that street wisdom and who have actually made it happen before, rather than those who necessarily have come up through a HR route. People talk about a difference between the public and the private sector, and yes, of course there is obvious differences, but you know, the skills of HR are common. You know, I think that probably the role that I occupy at the moment is one of the most high profile and most difficult HR jobs around. I'm empathetic with what the product is, by the way, of policing, but principally I came up with HR skills into the organisation, and I'm doing what I can in that organisation because of HR skills that actually I acquired in commercial sector, and that commercialism is really useful as a director of the Met in looking at how we do things, how we cost things, how we budget things, and that experience is regularly drawn upon. So I think other people may speculate that there is more a difference between private and public sectors as the recession bites. Actually, I think some of those are going away a bit, but the reality is the skills I used in my previous roles are exactly the same roles I'm using now in the Metropolitan Police. I can do it on sort of two levels, really. On the big level, the way that we are running as an organisation, our efficiency, our effectiveness. You know, just at the moment we're embarked on a series of major reviews across the business, which is about saving money. Some of those will involve extensive people investment, or might involve less people, if you get my drift. But most of it is about efficiency, about the way that we are organised, and all of that. And I am extensively involved in planning how those responses are, whether they be about operational requirements or whether they be about organisational requirements, as I am any other. Let me think of a lower level example. In the last few days, we need a different approach to some of our surveillance activity in the organisation. But the trouble is, with our current budgeting restrictions, there is no way that we can extend that provision at the moment. So we've had to look at ways in which we can still do what we need to do without breaking the bank by redirecting things in the organisation. Now, the consequence of that, I've been able to identify some ways that we can release some resource, both of transports, both of people, in terms of allowing that new facility that we so desperately require, particularly as we work up to the Olympics, to actually happen. That's the way in which HR needs to be operational. I don't believe it's the way that HR has been operational always in the past. I think what the CIPD are now doing and what Jackie Orme at the CIPD has done and led has been some phenomenal work. What they've done is reorganise the entire qualification structure to make it very pertinent to what the HR offering should be now, as opposed to the more traditional personnel management aspects, which is what it's been about. And I'm not saying that those more traditional aspects are not needed, they are, but actually it's not where HR is at the moment. It's got to be into a different area of business. And Jackie's done marvellously in bringing some of that thinking to a point of being able to completely revolutionise the whole CIPD structure. The downside is it's going to be a while before the fruits of that actually get delivered. And so therefore the issues that we have now, which desperately need that skill, there is a mismatch. So all you can do in your own organisations then is look at what skills you need, what skills you've got, and try and plug the gaps. Fortunately, in my own case, we've got a whole new model of HR that we're about to roll out on. And part of that has been about equipping those people who are appointed into some of the OD, some of the organisational reform roles that we've got, making sure that A, they're well selected, but B, they've also got the right wherewithal and right skilling and training in order that they operate from day one in their new roles. And so therefore we've set up a whole new strategic HR advice and business partnering training programme, a development programme that is actually sort of in the throes at the moment. And that, I hope, will be enough to see us through. It's also by investing in access to the type of material that those people will need, so that not only are you getting training, but you've also got reference material that you can draw down on. We have recruited externally. Given that this is a reorganisation, of course, we've been wanting to redeploy a great number of the people that we've had, and we've been successful in that, keeping the people we need and want to keep. But we've also created some gaps, which also we've been successful in recruiting business partners and strategic HR advisors from outside the Metropolitan Police. It's really important to me that we bring in the richness of people who've worked in other organisations, rather than become totally sort of inflected in our own affairs. The challenge that has come from the business partners that have come from external has been great. Just in saying, why do you do that? Why don't you do it this way? What about that? Just by challenging actually is a real change, and we need that and quite a lot more. The Met's HR, I have to say 5 years ago, 6 years ago, would not have been a place that the best and the brightest would have gravitated to. That position has changed, and we have been able to attract some of the brightest and some of the best. I think there's always going to be challenges around remuneration and the rest as to what we can pay, what other organisations can pay. But one of the impacts of this current economic period has been the closing of many of those gaps, whereby A, there are many, many more people on the market, and B, there are many, many more fine people on the market than there's ever been. And so at the moment, it's a buyer's market in terms of going out there and finding the right people. We do want the right people, though, that do not regard this period as a stepping stone back into. We want people who are going to come into my organisation and stay and develop. And there's lots of opportunities for them to do so. Change is always difficult to implement and to affect, but I think we've been through the worst of that, because we have now selected everyone into their new roles in the new organisation, even though the new organisation has not yet taken full effect. Secondly, we have already parted company with those who don't have a role in that new structure in anticipation. What I didn't want to get into was Yeah, and suddenly on that day, a lot of people leave and a lot of people arrive. That just does not gel well with me. And so we've been planning for this day. So in effect, everyone knows what their future position is or isn't. And actually the isn'ts have already largely departed. So therefore we are through that heavy morale period. Frankly, if I was to sort of straw poll my new organisation now and say, what's the mood of this new structure? I think nearly everyone, without exception, would say, can we just get there and do it? You know, this has been a long time in gestation. Can we now just arrive and do it? And that's the mood of the organisation at the moment. We have developed some indicators on two levels. One is the extent and the quality of transacting intervention. Because much that I feel that we need to be much more efficient and effective and cheaper about how we do the transacting work, it's also important that we do it well and we do it right. And so we have some basic performance indicators about numbers, about speed of response, so on and so forth, that we will be using in order to measure the success or otherwise. The second level will be in terms of the much higher level intervention. And again, there will be some basic indicators around impacts and interventions on higher level change across the organisation, which brevity of this interview is too short to go into, but they will have a feel of giving you some basic data that if it is denoting a certain trend, then you have the ability to go in and look at what else might need to be examined.